teams with four guys who know them very, very well. Later on, Giants, A's, and Dodgers and Angels. The Mets and the Yankees, of course, in the second hour. We'll do this first hour on the Cubs and the White Sox. Our old buddy is Phil Rogers, MLB.com. He joined us 4 or 5 years ago on a weekly basis. Does a superb job, and he says hello. Phil, thanks on short notice. Yours truly. How are you today, pal? Okay?
Yeah, Christopher, great. How are you?
Doing well, Phil. Let's do the White Sox first, because the Cubs are a little more juicy. I've heard nothing but good things about the White Sox in spring training. A lot of young pitchers are further along than maybe they thought. They got a good middle of the order, which is a little bit surprising. We all know they got 1 million young players. We know they're probably not going to, be that great as far as, being a competitive wild card kind of team. But it seems like the White Sox this year are on the right track, and it seems like they could surprise. Give us some thoughts on what you saw out in Arizona with the Chi Sox. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it is a very low-pressure camp. Rick Renteria is a guy that's made a really nice connection with his players. I think there's a good feeling there. I think the veterans in the clubhouse, Jose Abreu's still there. He's an important guy. James Shields for the pitchers, I think, has been a very important guy. And while they didn't do much in the offseason, I think the addition of Wellington Castillo is a significant upgrade. I think he's one of the better offensive catchers going, and he really lengthens their lineup because he's going to be the DH most times when he's not catching. So he's a guy I think that's a little bit under the radar, could have a really significant impact for them.
All right, do they have enough starting pitching to be competitive? I think they're going to score runs, Phil. Do they have, James Shields, top of the rotation, is not going to scare anybody. Do they have enough starting pitching to at least be, in games in the fifth inning here and not be down, 7-3 before you blink an eye? How about that for a sec?
As much as I like what they're doing now, I think it's going to be a tough year for them in terms of wins and losses. And I say that just because of all the guys that contributed last year that are no longer around. I mean, Jose Quintana for half a year, Todd Frazier, a bullpen loaded with guys. They actually had one of the better bullpens in the American League last year and traded all those guys away, got good parts for them. But I just think this is a clear transition year. And while Yohan Moncada is going to be a gas to watch, and they have guys coming. Eloy Jimenez, is probably as good-looking of a young player as there was in Arizona. But I don't know why they would rush him to the big leagues. I think it could be August or September before their next wave of young guys gets coming up. And I just think it's going to be a year to get guys experience. And you're right to look at the rotation. I mean, one thing that has happened in that rotation is Lucas Giolito looks really, really good. And, this is a guy that the Washington Nationals only 3 springs ago, his first year in the Nationals camp, they were talking about him like a young Tom Seaver. And then when that year was over, they traded him to get Adam Eaton. And I'm really surprised that a team could flip on a young arm like that, from April to October, December, the way they did. And Giolito looks really, really good, and he pitched well for the White Sox at the end of last year. I think they believe, he may not be a Chris Sale type number one, but he's a guy that's going to be a front of the rotation guy, a 1 or a 2, and this Michael Kopech coming behind him. But, this year's about getting the experience. And, I mean, it would be crazy fun if something caught fire and they had a big first half. But to me, that's expecting a little unrealistic, I think.
All right. Jimenez, now, give me a little rundown. I've heard a lot about him. Is he an outfielder, Phil? I'm not familiar with him. Give me a little rundown on him.
Yeah, he is. Well, we saw him at the Futures game 2 years ago. He made this catch in right field where he actually kind of tumbled. This was at the game in San Diego. He caught it. He kind of actually tumbled into the seats, making a catch after a long run. And then he hit a home run that went off the warehouse building down the left field line. He was a guy that the White Sox got from the Cubs. He was the big guy in the Jose Quintana trade. He grew up with the Cubs right there, in the Gleyber Torres era. He was a top international signing, and they love him. And one thing about him that I think is not insignificant is he is a really smart guy and a really practical guy. And he worked really, really hard in the Cubs system as soon as he got to Arizona when he was 17 to learn to speak English. He's Dominican, but he is, he's going to be a bilingual, bicultural kind of a guy, and he's a big power hitter. I mean, he will be, he's got a chance to be the White Sox version of a Chris Bryant. I mean, he's a really complete hitter that can hit for power. He's at every level. He's had success. He last year coming out of spring training had a little shoulder injury that put him a little bit behind, but he more than made up for it. If there was any reason to get him to the big leagues quick, it looks like he could do it, but there is no reason. So I think the White Sox will take it slow with him. But along with Moncada, and then the Red Sox spent over $50 million when they signed Moncada on signing bonus and tax, and the White Sox did the same thing with their center fielder Luis Robert. And I mean, these are cornerstone foundation guys. So with Moncada, Robert, and Eloy Jimenez, I think the White Sox have really collected some talent that is going to make them super interesting the next 5 years or so.
All right, White Sox 71, over under. You go over or you go under?
I think that's right about the number. I would probably, if there were better teams in the Central, I would take the under. But if you look at the Tigers, they're not going to be very strong. You look at the Royals, you don't know about them. I think the Indians could win a ton of games with the big stock, heavy playing these schedules a lot. So I think 71's about right. If I had to take a pick, I would take the over, but not by much.
All right, now the Cubs. That's a great update there on the White Sox. Let's do Cubs. Let's first do their spring training vibe compared to a year ago off a title. What did you sense out there in Mesa?
I think it's very similar. To me, the World Series hangover and all that is sort of a convenient storyline. To me, it's kind of rhetoric that maybe gives you an explanation afterwards, but nothing really that unusual happened with the Cubs. I mean, most teams that win 100-plus games one year don't win the 100-plus the next year. I looked this up. Going into last year, there were 99 teams that had won 100 games, and only 3 of those 100-win teams won more the next year. So to expect the Cubs to build immediately off of their World Series in 2016 by being better in 17 was, I think, unrealistic. So to me, it's always about the talent. It's not really about the narrative. And Joe Madden runs that camp super well. I mean, there was a significant turnover of coaches, so there's some different messages being delivered because the guys delivering them are different. But Theo Epstein, Joe Madden, I mein, everything is going to be shipshape, and it's going to be run very well. And I think that was the case again this year. But really, I think last year they just lost to the Dodgers last year. And if you look to 2016, going into the championship series, the Dodgers had been extended in the first round, and their pitching was all messed up, and the Cubs exploited that to beat them. Last year, it just kind of flipped around. The Cubs were lucky to get past the Nationals, and they were messed up when that championship series rolled around, and the Dodgers took advantage of that. It was pretty simple.
Yeah, fair. Good job. Phil Rogers here on the Cubbies. We know that Bryant, we know, of course, so we're sitting there with Rizzo. We know, the shortstop's good. Baez can field with anybody. We got the catcher's a good player. We get that. Hayward is what he is. Has a bad contract. He'll catch the ball, but he won't hit a lot. The question to me is Schwarber. I know he lost weight. He says he's going to be a better outfielder. He's a wreck in left field, but maybe he'll be better. Last year he was terrible. Went down to the minor leagues, and it's a guy that even he was bad, still hit 29 home runs. 2 years ago, you couldn't trade him for anybody. Last year it was a different feel. I think he's a very interesting guy to keep an eye on. Give me a little rundown on him. What'd you see in spring training?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think the jury's out. Schwarber looks good and looked good in spring training. We'll see when the season starts. He has been a tease. I think it was unrealistic to go into last year and think he would not be slowed by having virtually missed all of 2016. If he hadn't come back to play in the World Series, he would have gone into next year, and everybody would have said, "Oh, he's going to have to ease into it," or "Don't know what we'll get out of the shoot. He's going to have to get repetition." But because he was sort of Superman in the World Series, people just thought, well, he can pick up. And by people, I think I'm talking about Theo Epstein and Joe Madden and the Cubs themselves. I think there was an expectation. This guy's different, and he's going to be able to jump right back in it. But give Major League pitchers credit. They found ways to make him look bad. He took a lot of called third strikes when he's locked in and going good. If he takes a tough pitch, it's a ball. To me, it's kind of like Frank Thomas-like quality on laying off those pitches. But last year, he was taking called third strikes, and he was out of whack. I got another guy for you, though, besides Schwarber, too, that I'm really curious to see this year is Ian Happ, their center fielder. If he can play defensively in center field, if he can be adequate out there, it's not unlike the Schwarber left field. Happ can be a real difference maker. They didn't really have a leadoff guy last year, and they suffered. Schwarber started off the season as their leadoff guy, but 2016 Dexter Fowler had done a great job. But this Ian Happ is a terrific hitter, and he's a switch hitter. They have Albert Almora has been their defensive center fielder, and he's a very good, solid player, a good hitter too. But Ian Happ is dynamic, and he drives the ball. He can run. If he can play well enough in center field to stay out of a platoon with Albert Almora, he could jump up and be one of the more impactful guys in that lineup.
All right, 93.5 is their number. Over or under?
Easy over. 93 is what they won last year. And they're a lot closer. If you look at their pitching, that they're going to have a full year of Jose Quintana. We'll see about Tyler Chatwood as the number 5. I liked him when he pitched for the Rockies. I think that was a good sign too. I think their rotation, even without Arrieta, I'm buying into Darvish. I think Darvish was a tick better than Arrieta when it came to which one of those guys would you prefer to sign to a long-term contract. I think they're going to be more like the 2016 team than the 2017 team. But I don't think it's because they weren't hungry after they won a World Series or they were exhausted because of all the celebrations and the short off season. I just think talent-wise, I think they're a little bit better, and they're very, very deep. Zobrist always gave them one extra regular, and now you look with Ian Happ. At the least, he's another Ben Zobrist, where he can play all over the field. But if he's an everyday guy, they kind of all of a sudden have 2 extra regulars. So I like him a lot, and I'll take the over on that.
Phil, great job. That's a perfect update. We'll check in on TV and radio throughout the year. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Christopher.
Very good with Phil Rogers. They got a good feel there, White Sox and Cubs. I'll try to do that today with the 2 teams in each market to give you a little sense. At least you get 8 teams covered. We don't do the spring training trips as we used to. So if you love the baseball, we'll do our best here in the next 48 hours. We got a sports bite. Chris Lepresti's got it for us here on Mad Dog.